Hello, I am William Jamal Wright.
And I'm Hattie.
And this is our podcast, HattieJo. And on this episode, here in the month of November, we are going to discuss, there was this article that kind of talked about, I would say, social etiquettes. And there was like 101 like social etiquettes and things that like you should or shouldn't or people should have. And so I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of talk about some social etiquettes that we have. We'll talk about like 6 or 7 and just kind of discuss them and go from there. So
love it.
Yeah. And so a couple that I have out, we're going to start kind of here early. So we just came off of like COVID, and like during COVID, it was very like taboo to like handshake. Yes. Everything was like, and so now it is officially like we kind of gotten past COVID. Like it's officially like okay to like fist bump somebody as a greeting. Like, is that like I'm saying that it is officially okay to like. The times have changed and like you meet somebody new and you're like, oh, fist bump.
So are you saying that in lieu of a handshake? Or are you meaning like
in lieu of a handshake?
We're out of pandemic and so now it's okay to physically touch each other again?
I'm saying that like in lieu of a handshake, it is officially okay to like fist bump somebody as like a greeting. What do you think about that?
Sure, my facial expression says it all. Well, I think in certain circumstances that might be okay. Like if you're a kindergarten teacher and you're like, "Hi, new student," fist bump. But I don't. Or if you're, a gym teacher, or if you're a athletic sports coach and you're working with kids, I think that's a perfectly acceptable greeting. But would I, as an adult middle-aged woman, would I ever go up to someone and be like, that I first met and like fist bump them? No, that's not really my go-to. Yeah. But if someone came up to me and it was their go-to and they're like, "Hi, nice to meet you." Like if I was in a non-professional environment, okay, I would probably be just fine with it. But if it was like in a professional environment, I might be a little like, I mean, I'd go with it. I don't think I'd have any problems with it, but I'd just be like, I'm curious why a handshake wasn't offered. But I wouldn't necessarily say, even in the professional environment, that if someone did that to me, well, let me rephrase this. I think that there are certain cultures where a fist bump is a normal greeting. And so I think if a person of that culture were to come and fist bump me, there would be no problems. But if it was a person not of that culture that was like fist bumping me in a professional environment, then I think it would be very weird. So I think that, and it's hard to judge, is someone in a culture or not? Do you know what I mean? Like that's extremely difficult. But I do.
It's very subjective.
And it's very subjective, and it's very personal, right? Like certain people can claim different cultures that maybe someone looking at them wouldn't necessarily, guess. So I think that is part of what you're saying with it's subjective. Yeah. But it's also one of those things that it's personal to that. Like they get to make the choice of whether they ascribe to the culture. Like no one else can really make that choice for them. I mean, maybe we're getting a little off topic, but the point is, I think that in some circumstances it's completely fine, but in other circumstances, I would find that it would be weird. Yeah,
and I think that for me, like, even though in COVID, like, it was completely, like, reasonable to, like, fist bump somebody, like, that, like, I think we're kind of...
It was reasonable in COVID to fist bump people?
Yeah, it's, like, imposed the handshaking.
Just I thought it was, like, hi. Like, I'm waving at you from 6 feet away. Like we're not touching.
Well, I guess maybe that was just, like, in schools, like, and maybe I'm just, like, because... Yeah, because I would always think of, like, in a professional situation, you would never fist bump. Like, fist bumps is like buddies and homies and, like, friends and not, like, actual, like, coworkers or, like, professional, in professional situations.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move on.
Wait, so what you said you would never, or you think it was weird if somebody would fist bump you?
I would think it was weird. Yeah.
I mean, and again, assuming it wasn't one of your students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that, I don't consider my students like professionals. Like,
no, they're not.
They're kids. And so,
are you personally offended? Are you a
the next one. So, if you loan somebody money, all right, after a month, you can't ask for it back. Like, if you loan somebody money, like, it's kind of, all right, you got a month. If you're thinking about it and you want to ask for the money back, all right, that's fine. But once a month has passed, you should, like, chalk it up to that's the game.
Well, I think anytime you loan someone money, you should know and before you hand over the money, you should be 100% comfortable. This money could never come back to me. Yeah. And if you're not 100% comfortable with that, you should not loan the money. Yeah. That's what I think.
Well, okay.
But I think that once you have loaned the money and it's clear that both parties know it's a loan, I think you can ask for it back as much as you want, whenever you want, and maybe the other person needs to bone up and be like, it's never coming back to you, sorry, and that's the answer. But I think until the person tells you that answer, you're allowed to ask for it back as much and as long as you
as long as you
want. And like, I think the person in the wrong is the one that's borrowed the money and not given it back. Like, it's
yeah.
But I think it is different. Like, if you borrow money and something happens and you're like, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be able to pay this back, I don't necessarily think that person's in the wrong anymore. I think it's the whole, like, avoiding and not talking about it, and, like, that's when I think it gets awkward and weird. Whereas if both parties are just frank and upfront of, like, hey, I'd like my money back, please. Hey, I can't give you your money back. Or, next paycheck, thanks for reminding me, I totally forgot, like...
You're allowed to do...
I think it's totally fine. But then again, I also feel like this is all in the context of someone that hasn't partaken in lending money very often, and also not been in too many situations where I've asked for money. Like, I think there's only one time in my adult life that I borrowed money from someone, and it was my mom, right? And like, I think I cared more about paying it back to her than she cared about me paying it back to her. Yeah. Right? So I do think that all of my comments are in this grain of salt, idealistic world. Yeah. But I mean, on some level, if the IRS or the bank can come harassing you until the day you die, like, for their money, why is that any different? Like,
because it's like a social contract. It's like,
but that makes it seem like the person being kind and lending the money is in the wrong. Whereas to me,
no, they're not in the wrong. They're not in the wrong,
but they certainly can't ask for it anymore after a month. They're not allowed to ask.
Yeah, like 6 months goes by and you're still asking about like a $20 that you get. Like,
well, okay, so then is it a sliding scale? What if it was $5,000? You're not allowed to ask.
Like, for me, like $5,000, like I feel like that's gonna be like a payment like type situation. Like, if somebody's borrowing $5,000, if they need $5,000, chances are they're not gonna have $5,000 just
right. Like, so it's a payment plan and probably gonna take a lot more than a month to get back.
But that's different. Like, so a payment plan, like, there's plans for this to be paid out incrementally.
Yes. So like, this is my point though. Is like, is this a blanket that you made it sound like it was a blanket statement of anyone who loans any money can't ask for it back after a month, and it sounds like instead there are levels to this, and that this, what you just described, maybe applies to a $20 loan, but maybe doesn't apply to a $150 loan or a $5,000 loan or something. Like, it sounds like there's some point in your mind where it bumps into a different category, and what you just talked about doesn't apply.
Well, I would say that, like, the category, like, it's all like you're loaning somebody money. And so I do agree with your statement that if you loan somebody money, you should be prepared for them, like,
for it to never come back.
For it to never come back. But there's also, like, if you've loaned somebody money and, like, you would like to get your money back, right? Like, giving the person that you've, like, giving them reminders, like, hey, like, I gave you some money, I would like to get my money back. And it's also for, like, the person that is loaning the money, their, like, sanity. If you're, like, if this is always on your mind and you're constantly, like, thinking about asking the person, like, can you give me my money back? Like, I feel like that's a little emotionally draining, and you should just be like, you know what, like after a month, I'm not gonna like worry about this anymore. Like
that sounds so. I definitely agree with the concept of sometimes to say, depending on the relationship with the person, let's say it may be worth, like keeping the good relationship may be worth that amount of money. Do you know what I mean? And so maybe to your point, the lender is like, I'd rather not harass this person or make them feel bad or whatever. My relationship with them matters more to me than this money. I'm willing to just let it go. But I still feel like, as the person being kind and lending the money, like I feel like this is a social contract that the borrowers have created to take advantage of people. And like, oh, it's awkward, like the person who lent the money should be feeling bad for asking for it back, instead of the person who borrowed the money, they should be feeling bad for not paying it back.
Well, I'm sure they do feel bad. Like,
do they though? If everyone acts like, oh, it's just forgotten, it's water under the bridge, like the person lending shouldn't ask after a month, then it just seems like, oh, I got away with it. It's gonna be too awkward for them to ever ask, so it's not a big deal. Like, I just feel like these social contracts come about to make the person who was doing the right thing by loaning money feel bad about wanting to get it back.
But this is
they should not be the ones feeling bad. They should have every right to get it back and to try to get it back.
They have every right to they have every right to try and get it back. Like I'm not trying to say that they don't have the right to get it back, or that I don't believe they have the right to get it back. I'm just saying that like.
So they shouldn't be able to they shouldn't be able to try to get it back? How else do you get it back if you don't ask for it back? If the person
within a month, like you ask for it back. All right, so if it was like a year, would that change your?
Well, so to me, I definitely think it matters the amount of loan and the time passed, because I'm not asking for $5 back after like more than a week, right? Right? But if I lent somebody $40 and they said, yeah, I fully intend to pay you back, and 6 weeks go by, I don't see any issue with me being like, hey, we're meeting up again for dinner. Do you want to buy mine since you still owed me $40? Like, I think that's a reasonable.
But that's not asking for the money back.
Well, it's like, asking for a comparable like exchange.
Yeah, but that's not a like.
Or you could say,
No, but
hey,
I'm
when we meet up for
talking
dinner, would
specifically.
you mind bringing me, in case it slipped your mind, I'm still waiting on $40. Like.
Yeah, like, in case you slipped your mind, I still like my money back. Like.
Yeah.
That's what I talk about. Like, you're not asking for like. Quid pro quo, like, oh, I did something for you, now you do something for me.
But I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing to say, is like, oh, by the way, since you still owe me that $40, do you want to just buy me dinner tonight instead? Like, I think that's completely fine. If you're like,
but
supposing
like, you
the
want
situation
the money
is
back.
that,
Like, yeah,
supposing the situation is that you're meeting up with your friend for dinner.
Yeah.
If you weren't already going to see them for dinner, then that doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't be like, hey, in lieu of paying me back, you're going to take me to dinner. But that was just an example of like, I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with this. I mean, I do think it's a little ridiculous, and I think part of this kind of just goes back to the concept of like, you shouldn't loan the money if you're not comfortable with never getting it back.
Yeah.
Because I do think a lot of times when people ask for loans, the reason they're not going to a bank is because they're in a desperate place.
Yeah.
And so with a bank or something, a more formal type of loan, you're definitely intending to pay it back, and it's on a plan, and yada, yada, yada. And if you're not going that route, it's already like 90%, you're not going to get it back. So it's kind of one of those things where you should like read the room type thing. Like, if you really want your money back that bad, don't let it leave your hand in the first place. But yeah, I think we just disagree on this one. I don't see any issue with that. Yeah.
So, the next one. When you go out to a meal with a group of friends, it is expected that the check will be split. And it will be split equally. Unless somebody...
Wait, it's expected that it will be split equally?
Yes. Like, when you go out with a group of friends, it's expected that the check will be split equally.
Is it, or... Are you asking me? Is it?
I'm saying that it is.
Oh, I think when when you go out with a group of friends, it's expected that it's split. But I think it depends on the group of friends on how it is split. So I think some friends might be more water under the bridge. It'll all even out over time. So just split it equally. And I think other friends will be like, no, you had 10 margaritas and I had none. And that was on purpose. I would like to pay just for what I consumed.
So I would say that, like, it is always expected when you go out with a group of friends. And these are, like, real friends. These are, like, not like, oh, let's some work friends. Like, we're all going to get together and, like, we don't really hang out. But, like, this is a random
This is your
friend.
bestie.
Like, these are people that, like,
well,
you call to,
like,
like,
it depends on the group of friends. Because some friends, you know you're going to see a million times in your life.
Yeah.
Versus where it is going to all even out. And other friends, you're right, are more like acquaintances or like somewhere in the gray area between acquaintances or friends.
Yeah, but for this purposes, I'm thinking like
for this conversation.
Friends, yeah, like they're friends. Like you guys are intentionally like talk to each other on a consistent basis. Like when you guys go out, like I would think that it's gonna be split. Like
split evenly.
It's gonna be split evenly. Like it doesn't matter what you order. It doesn't matter what like I order. Like we're gonna give.
Well, I think that again, that just depends on the group of friends, and it sounds like you're the more water under the bridge type with your group of friends, and I do think that, you know, I personally have a group of friends like that, but I wouldn't expect every single group of friends to be that way. I think I think it depends on your friends.
So I would say it shouldn't depend on the friends. It should just be like when the group goes out, like it would like we're gonna split this and.
Well, that's just your perspective. Like I think that's your personality and perspective. But you might have a friend that is just as close a friend as you.
It's supposed to be like we're trying to like. I know that like you want to be like, oh, this is like a specific situation, but these are supposed to be like general rules that are.
Yeah,
like,
and
followed.
I think the general etiquette is to go with the group consensus, not to say, oh, I'm assuming.
So what would you say is what would you like to be what would you like to be the group consensus? Or
and it
like
depends on the group. But my etiquette.
There should be some social like. So the point is,
my etiquette is the social norm should be someone asks to make sure everyone at the table is good with whatever the proposed plan is.
But like that kind of if that was the case, we always talk it out. There's no rule. There's no need for rules. Would you not agree with that?
Grab that toy?
Like if every time, we're gonna have a discussion about this and we're gonna figure out what we're gonna do, then there would be no point in having the social rules. Like,
well, no, I think that is the social rule because right now I think some people think that they have this etiquette and other people don't, and it leads to people getting frustrated but not talking about it. Like I think right now there's a lot of people that.
So I'm asking you, what should be the rule though?
So the rule should be to talk about it.
But that is the rule. Is that not the current rule?
Correct. It's not the current rule. I think.
So what is the current rule then?
The current rule is it. I don't know what the current rule is. But it's not to talk about it. Like.
But my point, my objection to yours, my objection would be that like, if there is no current rule, then the current rule should be that we're going to split it. Everybody's going to split it equally.
Why? Why not something
because
else?
Then that like. I feel like
why should it be split equally as the default? Why shouldn't it be whenever I take care of the choices I made and you take care of the choices you made? Why is that not the default? Because
to me that creates a very individualistic society, and that like nobody is really we can't. There's no sense of community there. Like I just worry about what I order, you worry about what you order. Like there's no sense of community. Like. We're here, like. But
there is a sense of personal responsibility.
Yeah, but like that's not, in my opinion, going out with your friends is not about like, what is my personal responsibility here? Like my personal responsibility is to make sure I wake up and go to work so so that I have a job. Like that's like going out with your friends. For me, when I go out with my friends, I'm not thinking about this is my personal responsibility. I got to make sure that I'm like, this is a community. We're going out together. We're getting together. Like, it's the community thing. So, like, everybody in the community pitches in, and we're all gonna take care of this. but you seem to
Well,
have
I think
more
also, babe, like, you and your group of friends have very similar, like, I don't want to call it attitude, but, like, similar behaviors when you go out. And so then it does become pretty much in the wash. But not every time are you going to be in a group that all has similar behaviors. Like, there are some families that their normal is not to order appetizers. Their normal is not to hardly go out to eat at all, right? And so then if you mix that with people whose normal is to eat like order 3 or 4 appetizers, you know, that suddenly, like, that adds up and suddenly becomes, I just think it's a place that can lead to a point of contention. And that's why in my perfect society, the etiquette would be to ask and have these conversations up front and to have it not be such a taboo topic. Like, then we wouldn't need a default because...
But, like, things like opening the door, that's like a social norm. So do you think, like, that should be discussed? Like, oh, will you, like, open the door? Like, never mind. All right. So you believe that it should be discussed every single time, like, what is the arrangement going to be for paying for this before it happens? Okay. So I would say that it is, if you go out with a group of friends, people that, like, you have gone out with before and you guys are kind of like, it's a community thing, and, like, you do this on a regular basis, you kind of, like, everybody splits it equally, and it's more of a community thing as opposed to individually personal responsibility. So the next one, so if you are hosting a party, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and it's getting kind of late and some people are hanging out and not really reading the room, like, should you, like, tell people when it's time to go, or let them kind of figure it out on their own? Like,
so can you go first on this one? I feel like I've gone first on the past 2.
Yeah, well, that's fine. Yeah, I think that, like, the most
this is
polite
a very awkward situation you describe.
Yeah, I feel like the most polite thing to do is to let them figure out on their own that, like, the party's over, it's time to go home. It does, like, I'm much more of a, like, hopefully they will figure it out, and, like, more, I want to be, like,
you're conflict
polite.
averse.
Yeah, conflict averse. Perfectly put. I would be conflict averse in these situations. Not that I think that, like, hey, this is my house. We're trying to, like, getting kind of late here. You mind heading home? Like, not that I think that is, like, creating a conflict, but I could, like, it is kind of a little awkward. So I would say that the rule is you let people figure out on their own. And when you decide to host somebody, like, you are opening, or when you decide to host a party or host a group of people over, you are saying, all right, let's, unless you put specifically, this is the time. Yeah, I was going to say,
if you have a very specific, like, a need or a specific reason that something needs to end at a certain time, I think the onus is on the host to make that known at the outset. Like, usually at the time invitations are being made. Mm-hmm. And not that it needs to be a physical invitation, but just, like, you know, if you're like, hey, do you want to come over and watch the game? Like, you can say, so if you need everybody to leave when the game ends, you can say, like, we have another commitment when the game's over, or, like, it's going to be, you know, it starts at 6 and it'll go till whenever the game ends, or whatever. Like, but if you just say, hey, want to come over and chill, I do feel like that's kind of an open-ended thing that could last who knows how long. So I do feel like, though, again, I don't think it's rude to be, if you're the host and, like, everyone else is left, if the guests are not picking up and not reading the room, bless you, I think it's perfectly reasonable to, and I know this sounds really passive-aggressive, but I don't mean it in a passive-aggressive way, but to, like, start cleaning up or start, you know, like, not engaging so much so that they can, like, get the hint. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just making the hint more hintful. Like, you're just being more obvious with the hint. And, like, if they're still not getting it, then I do think there's a way that you can have the conversation without being conflicty and without being hurting any feelings, but just be like, hey, you know, I'm sorry I didn't make this clear, but I think we need the party to wind down. Like, I think that's fine. And I think that's better than saying, like, you need to leave. But I also feel like it doesn't take much maturity to start to learn these things. Like, I just don't find that I'm in a situation very often where it's like, well, I guess I just don't post a lot of things, but yeah. I just don't find the situation to come up more often than on TV. I feel like TV is where this mostly happens.
Yeah, well, it's funny too that, like, I've been at, like, say I'm like staying with a friend and they're hosting the party, and I've been like, yo, it's definitely time for this to be like over. Like, people need to start going home. And that's like when I get the like, oh, I'm definitely not conflict averse now. Like, yeah, you guys
you've gotten over the conflict averse hump. Yeah. But
I do think that, like, and like I see the point of view as the hoster that, like, oh, like, if you have put on this event and it is like, you didn't say, oh, it's ending at this time, then it's on the host to kind of be polite and let people
and also on the host
determine when they like are ready to go.
Right. That's kind of on the host to have the expectation, like, that I also need to pick up what the guests are putting down.
Yeah.
You know, and play it more by ear. So
along those lines of kind of like, so if you have a friend or like somebody that you they frequently tell the same story, and you've heard the story like over and over and over. In this article that kind of prompted this discussion, they say you have 5 seconds to tell the person, oh, I've heard this story before, you don't need to tell it again. So do you like agree that, like, first of all, you have the 5 seconds, and would you, like, if somebody's telling a story that you've heard like a million times, would you like stop them from telling the story and be like, we've heard this story before?
Well, I think it's going to be the same answer I give all the time. It depends. So if I'm in a group, if I get to group setting and I'm reasonably confident other people in the group have not heard the story, then I feel like it is a little rude to be like, yo, half of us have heard the story already, but when the other half hasn't, I do think that's kind of rude. But if it's like with your best friend or your parent or someone that continually tells the same story and it's like just you as the captive audience, or just the same group of 3 best friends that have always hung out together, you know, then I do think it is fine to turn it into a little bit of a joke of like, you know, like they start being like, oh yeah, this one time, and then you're like, yeah, when you did this, and like just kind of steal the words out of their mouth, like, because then maybe I'm just mean, I don't know, but I do think you absolutely have to nip it right in the bud.
All right, so
like once the story starts, you gotta let them finish. But I also think it depends on your friend's emotional state, right? Because if they are like really needing to tell this story and are going to be hurt by the fact that you acknowledge that you already know the story, then like I think that should be taken into account. Like,
their emotional like state.
Yes.
Like, well, I would say that like you just let them tell the story. Like, whether you've heard it 1,000,000 times or you've heard it like 2,000,000 times, you just let them tell the story, and hopefully they get better at telling the story like quickly, faster. Hopefully
they get better at
more efficient, efficiently telling the story. But yeah, I feel like whenever they want to share the story, like
they get
to share the story. So I am never going to be like, oh, like I've heard the story. I probably would say, oh, you've told the story 1,000,000 times. I feel like that's as far as I would go in terms of interrupting them. Like, yeah. Oh, you told the story 1,000,000 times, and we're about to hear it for 1,000,001.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna let that one roll. So, the next one. So, I wasn't quite sure how to like. So, this got me thinking because I went to I coached basketball. After the day of the election, my players were like, "Coach, who did you vote for?" And I was like, "What? That's a very inappropriate. That's a very inappropriate thing to do." So it got me thinking, like, is it okay, or like, under no circumstances should you ask people who they voted for?
Pretty much.
Like,
I mean, unless you're.
I can't think of a situation where like I need to know who you voted for.
Yeah, unless it's more. The only time I can see that it being a question one could reasonably ask is if it's either a spouse to a spouse or a parent to a child or a child to a parent in a like personal. You're not in public, and it's more of a curiosity question. It's not of a like, did you vote for the right person type conversation. But I can see like a parent just wanting to understand a kid's thought process and asking. Do I think that that's like a reasonable question to ask? Like maybe not, but I could see it being done in a way that's not judgmental, I guess. But I think most of the time it's going to be a judgmental question. And I also feel like just because it's your spouse doesn't mean that you should always be asking or answering. It's more of a, I think it really depends on the situation. But if it's not your spouse and it's not your child or your parent, you absolutely should not be asking. Under no circumstances is that a question that you ask. And there's only a very few select circumstances in those other situations I described that I feel like it could be. I mean, it's still going to be a towing the edge question no matter what.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are circumstances that it can be towing the edge and other circumstances where it's like definitely over the line, even if it's with your spouse or if it's with your child. Or your
like, I don't think you should ever ask. For me, I think it's a straight, hard line. No, never ask somebody. Like, first of all, if you know them well enough, you should probably already know who they voted
for. Yeah.
So, like, I don't need to ask people that I already know.
That's why I feel like a parent-child question, like, they might actually not have that background. Or maybe a couple days before the election, you're an independent or something, and the two of you are debating back and forth on the merits of one candidate or another. Like, I can see some very select circumstances. But you would have to definitely have exactly what you're talking about, knowledge in advance of like their willingness to share this information.
I guess
it's very few. I'm not saying there's a lot of circumstances, and I'm not saying just because you're spouses or just because you're a parent-child relationship that it's always okay. Yeah. I still think it's like 98% of the time, probably not good.
Yeah, I feel like.
So,
or at least for me, it's a
100%.
It's a 100% no. Like, if whenever you're ready to vote, I should have an idea of who you're voting for. And if you want to tell me, great. If not, I'm not going to be asking.
There you go. Well,
I should already know. I should already know.
It is illegal.
What?
It's well, maybe not illegal to ask someone, but it's illegal to, like, public record cannot just tell who you voted for. Oh yeah,
your vote is like not like your vote is private. Like they're not gonna. It's not public record who
Correct.
you voted for. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in that vein though, it's illegal if someone were to like chart down what you're voting for, because that's private information.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be able to find the.
I mean, unless you told them.
Yeah. All right. So this is the last one that I have. So I think we've kind of discussed this previously in the past, but if you have a friend or relative that is their significant other is somebody that you're not very fond of, or your friend group is not very fond of them, you should, you get choices here. You should tell them individually, or you should do it as a group.
Or you should not tell. You say nothing.
Yeah.
There is nothing you can do. Like, okay, to a point. If you feel like this person is causing your friend or your loved one actual physical danger.
Well, not physical or emotional. Just like you don't like this person. Like, you don't like them a lot. Like, you think they make your loved one like a worse person. Like, you don't like how they are with them. Like, they're not like physically or emotionally like hurting them. You just don't like the person that they are. You kind of like, you just don't like them.
Then you say nothing unless they bring it up to you. And to me, that's a blanket. Doesn't matter what your relationship is. Always the case, even if they've broken up. you say nothing unless they come to you and say, I'm really struggling, like, what do you think? Like, unless they are inviting your opinion, that opinion, you take it to the grave. Like, you take that to the grave.
So,
what? Hattie's ethics, Hattie's etiquette.
Yeah.
You can talk about anything. You
but
can
you got
but not this. Like.
Oh no. Well, we can talk about who split the check, but we can't talk about. So, I would say that like you. So say like you're like it's a significant like other, and like there's a group of people there, like you guys are discussing, you're like, we don't think this is a good idea. Like, I believe that it should all be like, all right, we're gonna have this one sit down conversation, just like an intervention, and we're gonna express our feelings, because I think it's easier to do as a group.
Yes.
And like be like, hey, we support whatever decision you make.
But clearly you don't support whatever decision you make, otherwise you wouldn't be having this intervention.
We need to voice this our concern. Like, we're gonna support you no matter which way you go. But know that we have this concern, and like it just wouldn't feel right if we didn't let you know. Like, we wouldn't like.
Have you ever had to do this?
So I have had to tell like a friend that like him and his girlfriend, like, they weren't like, this isn't gonna work out. Like, this is.
How did that go for you?
So, like, first of all, it was very freeing to be like, all right, I got this off my chest. Like, they know. And so now I didn't feel so bad about like it happened, and I was like, you guys are just like bad for each other. You shouldn't be together anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, do you not see that you're not making each other happy? Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of like, that happened, and they stayed together for a good significant portion after that. Mm-hmm. And because they like kind of stayed together, like it was kind of like awkward between like
you don't say
the other person and I. But I will say that like I told them both. Like, it wasn't like a one-on-one.
Okay.
It wasn't like me talking to like one person.
Okay.
Like, I told like
you sat them both down at the same time and
like like there had been some adult beverages
more awkward.
So there had been some adult beverages that had been consumed, and they were like arguing, and like we had gotten back to the apartment, and like I just kind of went off on both of them. And so
not only have you done this, but you're still
what? Nobody can understand what you're saying.
Not only have you done this, but you're still recommending it as like a thing. Is it okay?
Yes. No, I wouldn't suggest doing it the way that I did it. But I do think that like you should voice the concern for somebody that you love.
Oh my god.
And so, like, it was awkward because like the significant other was there when I said it. That's what made it awkward.
Well,
but I will say that
addressing it to both of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Like I was addressing it to both of them. And like because it happened, I will say that like I became like whenever like I saw them, it was I became less concerned about like I don't know. It was just like a freeing.
Yes,
it was
a
freeing experience.
chest.
I got it off my chest. You guys can do with the information what you do. Like whenever you guys get angry at each other or like in the future, I'm just gonna be like, I told you, like I don't think this is gonna work, but like you guys can do it if you want to.
Right.
And so like I didn't like. Oh well, they're just doing what they do. I can continue to have a good time. I don't need to worry about like. And so it was. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing it the way that I did it, but I would recommend doing it. And if it's a group of people that like have the same concern, I would recommend doing it as a group to that one individual.
Oh man, if it's gonna happen, I would recommend it's a one-on-one. I would recommend and like. Oh God! What a way to make someone feel ganged up on and feel.
But like it's so much worse to like. So it's much easier.
I love that we're diametrically opposed. Like every aspect of this, we are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
So on every it's much easier. Say you have a friend and like you go as a group. It's much harder for that friend to be like, "Oh, I'm gonna cut all of you off." Like, I'm not
what do you mean
friend.
you go as a group?
Like you go as a group to voice your concern.
Oh, okay.
So it's much harder for your friend to be like, "Oh, I'm gonna cut all of you off now," as opposed to
if you're that good of friends, you shouldn't be worried about them cutting you off when you express an opinion.
But that happens.
Well, that's the risk you got.
So I would say that like yeah, like they're.
Them's the consequences, folks.
So Hattie, if you were gonna do it, which Hattie suggests you don't do, if you're gonna intervene, do it on a one-on-one basis.
Yes. But let it be known.
Yeah, she's choosing option C.
Yeah, I do not recommend. Like 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Oh my goodness.
All right. Well,
oh baby doll.
So this was an article. I think it like you can go and find it just like on 101 like social keys. But yeah,
this was a great discussion.
Yeah, made her laugh a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I mean I do feel like this is part of what's interesting about etiquette is because even if there are certain ingrained things in our society, not everyone ascribes to them. Like you talk about, and not everyone, bless you, sees it the same way. Bless you. Like you talked about the holding the door open thing. Some people don't. And it's like, do you not know the etiquette to like look behind you and see if someone, right? And some people, if they're too far behind, they won't. But everyone has like a different distance for like, when do you stop and keep holding the door versus when are you like, that's too far away, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just all very interesting to see how almost every single person, I would wager, in our society, if you ask them, are you aware that there's an etiquette for holding the door for someone behind you? They would say yes. But yet the spectrum of behavior that exists around holding the door is wide. Like, It is wide. And so it's fascinating to me to see everyone knows, but yet we have this varying degrees and very different behaviors exhibited by very different people
on holding the door.
So I find that super interesting. So that's why this whole discussion was really interesting to me. So yeah. Well, that's what we're doing.
Deuces.